I got into teaching because I love to stand up in front of an audience and be the center of attention. And then as I continued on being a teacher, I slowly discovered that it turns out that that was really good for my ego, but not so good for the students actually learning anything. The reasons for that, there's lots of studies that support this that show that students just don't pay attention. You teach, but do they learn? Right? So if you get up there and you're talking, you're having a great time. You know everything that you have to teach, and so when you're done, you may feel really good. And in many cases, if you ask your students what they thought of the lecture, they'll tell you that it was great. They learned a lot. They enjoyed it. You're a great teacher. Turns out studies show that great teachers don't teach who lecture, don't teach any better. In other words, students don't learn any more effectively from great teachers than they do from lousy teachers. The basic idea is you are not going to teach them anything. I know that sounds odd, so what is the point of the reading? The reading is to direct their attention to information they should already know or critical background information they need to understand the lesson the next day. So if there's fundamental information that they must have that they may not have, or terminology, as the teacher, I would be looking at the screen there on the phone, and what it does is it tells me who got it right, who got it wrong, and who has yet to answer. So I can use that information to sort of guide my lesson, or do something like show the students the results. Okay, so I can immediately see where the levels of understanding and potential misunderstanding are. Most days, you hope that the bar graph there is on only one answer, right? But in some readings, there may actually be, and I like to throw these in, multiple correct answers. which the students have a very hard time with, but it's something they need to get used to. This is a graded question. This is the only graded question I use during the day. From this point on, and the students know this, and it's very important that they understand this, the rest of the day, all the questions that they're answering are to assist in the learning process. Okay, so they know that this is the only graded question. Now, I would never, of course, show them this during the class, but since we're trying to learn how to use the system, there's a nice reports page here, and I can view and see how everybody answered, who got it right, and who got it wrong. Now, the next stage of the lesson would be to have the students look at a pattern. So I'm going to show you a pattern here on the screen and ask you to discuss this pattern with your neighbors and see if you can figure out what's going on. Discussion is encouraged. You need to engage with your neighbors, see if you can see the pattern, and hopefully, when you have, you'll be prepared to answer some of the questions.
When you don't. So really the pattern is between the first row and the second row. Right. Right, exactly. So you get the same answer.
So normally I would allow this conversation to continue as long as it took, as is appropriate for the lesson, but we have limited time for this particular lesson. So I'm going to ask you to finish your current thought.
It's all significant figures. Why is it different?
And then let's see. Now the next step here would be, after you've had some time to think about it, to come up with a rule. Based on your discussion with your neighbor, you would write down, and this is really important, we write it down on paper in my class, even though it's a computer class. Why? Why do we use paper? Yeah, it's a different part of the brain, right? If they use their fingers to type it in, go into a different place. And so I switch repeatedly. One day they have to use paper, the next day they're allowed to use Google. They're allowed to type it directly to a Google Doc. We get them talking about it. We're trying to hit as many different learning methodologies as possible, as many different pathways into the brain for that information to get there. So they write down what they think, how this is supposed to work after having had the discussion, and then we're ready to move on to our first question. So, Mr. Brennan, would you select the first question? So turn your clicker towards Mr. Brennan. And it looks like we have got almost everybody. There we go. Okay, now again, normally I would be holding the phone myself, so I would be looking at what the results are. This is going to be a bit of a surprise to me as well, but let's see what the class had to say. Interesting. So, based on this, I can tell that most of you settled it in one or two theories, but there seems to be quite a bit of disagreement, doesn't there? So let's spend a moment, talk to your neighbor. Figure out distance. Explain to your neighbor. Don't tell them which way you answered. Tell them why you answered the way you did. And ask them to explain how they came up with their answer. And then decide if that changes your mind. Do you want to alter your answer based on what you heard? And if you want to change your answer, you can hold it up and Mr. Brennan will scan it. Yes. Oh, okay. Okay, so now the next step here would be, again, depending upon how the discussion went and if most people are coming to an agreement, I might spur the conversation on. Okay, so now what do you think? Come up with a theory. How do you explain that? Can you see the correct answer, folks?
But it has to be rounded down.
So do we have some new theories that might explain this? Would you like to try to apply your new theory to a new question? Let's see. So Mr. Brennan, bring up question number 2.
So now we can get two significant counts. So now it's going to be 2 point something.
I didn't break these on the last.
But nothing on that pattern sheet had a point.
Okay, so I'm dying to see the results of this one. Would you guys like to find out what happened? All right, let's see. Okay. So, again, because we're short on time, I would not normally skip to this. I would encourage discussion, right? Because we want to see if we can bring people together. And then eventually, we will reveal the answer. So, now, what is the benefit of teaching this way? Any ideas? How have you been enjoying yourselves? It's very interactive, isn't it?
They have to think. You're not just telling them the answer. They have to figure out as they go. Why would it do that? Why would it do that? Why would it do that?
And they know that their answers are good there, although they don't say.
I don't identify who got it right or
But they
wrong,
still
but
know.
it's important to understand that on my app there, it is showing me who is getting it right or wrong.
Yeah.
Right? So I can ask probing questions to sort of try and get to if there's somebody who's getting it right and I want to add their ideas to the conversation, or if there's somebody who's getting it wrong, I can seek clarification. So here's the other thing I use this for, is right before a test. So for example, I could go into, let's go to period 6 AP Computer Science A. I would go in, go to reports. So in the review period right before a test, just check AP Computer Science A there. You click on the period 6. So these are all the questions that I've asked that class. Okay? So I can go through, and there's key questions that I've asked as I've gone along. Questions that I know are going to trip students up and reveal that they understand or don't understand something. So I'll call that question up, and then right before the test, I look who got it wrong, and then I go directly to that student and do a check for understanding one-on-one. Right? So this gives you effective data that you can go back and mine to help you intercede with students. Yes?
Do the students figure out that they can just turn the card and it changes their answer on the board?
Yes, but you don't normally, they wouldn't know which is the right answer, so that doesn't help them.
Okay.
And also keep in mind that it depends on how you're using this. So I use this to encourage discussion. I want them to change their answers. That is the process. We want them to come to the right answer, and it's really important that you communicate to them that getting the wrong answer is part of the process. That you want to remove that pressure to get the right answer. It should be fun. They should want to get the right answer the first time, but it shouldn't be important. What should be important is coming to the right answer, getting that understanding.